So, one of the principles that I like to use the most when I'm teaching any kind of 3D content is to think about any element as simple shapes. And we go from simple to complex. That's the name of this chapter, and that's what we're going to be doing today. So, as you can see, we have our very nice blocking over here that's giving us a good result. But now we really need to start polishing and making sure that we get the proper proportions everywhere. So, if you were to ask me, where would you start on something like this if you were in production? I would probably start with the easy parts first. Why? Because once you have the easy parts done, then you will have more time for the hard parts, such as the volcano and the blade. And also, it will be. We as humans have this very interesting thing where the more little steps we take, the easier it is to see the final result. If we try to take everything as a big chunk, it becomes really overwhelming. So, if you focus on the simple things that you know you can get right from the very first time, then everything else becomes a lot easier. So I'm gonna go here to the handle. We're gonna do the handle. I'm gonna press Shift A, mesh, and we're just gonna create a cylinder. Now the cylinder, I'm gonna do GC and I'm gonna bring it up. I'm gonna make it really, really small, and I'm gonna match the concept. Right here, we can actually match the scale of the handle right around that point. So I'm gonna go back to vertex by going tap, and we're gonna go to wireframe. I'm gonna select all of the vertices right here, and with G and Z, I'm gonna bring this up all the way where I don't see the handle anymore, which is right around here. It's very important that we don't model things that we don't see. It might be very tempting to just continue the handle all the way to the top of the volcano or something. Like that would be the way it would work on the real world probably. But in this case, since we're only going to be seeing this part, that's where we want to add, because any other polygon that's hidden is going to be a waste of polygons, and it's going to be a waste of texture space. So you don't want to invest more of that into things that we're not going to be seeing. This one, as you can see, goes a little bit like thinner, so I'm gonna scale this down a little bit more. And here's again where you need to use your eye and calculate. You can need to see that even though we're not following the concept perfectly because we're following our own perspective, I am looking at the sort of like shape that we're getting, and that's the kind of result that I'm going for. I'm gonna grab everything down here, and I'm gonna do G and Z to bring this all the way back or all the way down. And again, same rule. If we don't see the handle anymore at that point, that's where we stop. We don't need to do anything else. Now, some of you might be wondering, do we need to add more divisions to this thing? Do we need to do or change anything? And the answer is not really. Like, this is a perfectly good low poly version. On the contrary, we might need later on, when we're doing the low poly, we might need to reduce the amount of elements that we have right here. However, if I were to apply a subdivision modifier to this one, you're going to see that one thing is going to happen, especially to the top and the bottom part. And that's the fact that since we don't have any support edges, we're losing a lot of the fun things of the cylinder. So I'm going to go to edge mode. I'm going to select this top cylinder. There we go. And I'm going to select the bottom cylinder right here. And both of them, I'm going to do Control B. Just do a small little bevel there with two divisions. So on the options, I'm going to do two divisions. That way, when we apply the subdivision surface modifier, we're not going to have any issues, and it's going to look really, really, really smooth. Finally, you can just shade smooth, of course, on the object to make sure that it looks as nice as possible. And that's it. If it has a couple of like nicks and things like that, we can add that later in sculpting or even in texture. So something like this is perfectly fine. One thing that I do recommend is make sure, please make sure to keep your things organized. So call this handle, okay? Do not wait until the very end to modify how this thing looks. Now, one of the things of the handle that we're not going to be doing right now is this sculpting of the coals, right? This looks like a stone handle. Very uncomfortable if you ask me, but that's the concept. And as you can see here in the concept, this does not look like leather. It literally looks like rock. So this rock is something that we're going to have to model later on. However, we can add like the precursor to that modeling that we're going to be doing. And what I need here is a shift mesh, and I'm going to do another cylinder. So I'm gonna S with the cylinder, G and Z, bring this up, and you can see that it starts right around there. I'm gonna go to vertex mode, wireframe. All of this vertex right here, G and C, we're gonna bring them down, and you can see it does become a little bit wider at the bottom, so I'm gonna make it a little bit wider. There we go. And then this guy's right here, a very interesting thing is that it's sort of like rotated a little bit, right? So I'm going to scale this a little bit, and then I'm going to rotate in the y-axis, sorry, in the x-axis. So rotate x to get the sort of like angled effect that we had. So even though we are not, again, sculpting this thing right now, I can get a very nice idea of how this is going to look. Usually handles, if you've ever held a weapon before, like a sword or like a like an X, they're not perfectly round. So I could expect this inner handle to be round, but this one right here, I'm gonna scale on the X axis a little bit to make it a little bit flatter. So something like this. Yes, we're gonna have some protrusions and extrusions from the general elements right there, but again, this is more than enough. If you want to go the extra mile, and I always encourage my students to go the extra mile, one of the things that we could do is we could go here. Let's go to loop cut, and we're gonna add just a couple of loop cuts right here, just a couple of random ones. And then what we can do, let's go to solid, grab edges. We're gonna grab this one, for instance, and just scale it on X only, just a little bit. Same for this one, scale on X just a little bit. And grab this one, SX, and just a little bit. Again, this is mainly for like visualization purposes. It's not that we're going to be using it, but it gives us a nice general idea of how the whole thing is going to look later on once we sculpt this rocks. So I'm going to right click and shade this as smooth. We do lose a little bit of that effect, but we still keep this sort of like irregular shape, which is what we're looking for. Now, one complex shape, this piece right here. Again, it's a weird shape, to be honest. Like the ring, it's fine. This is just a cylinder. We're gonna do it in just a second. But this one right here, that's definitely a crazy piece. So let's start with this cylinder first, which is gonna be right around there. Now, if we count the sides, you can see that this is a 6-sided cylinder. And again, understanding the shapes and looking at them before we do them gives us a huge advantage. So I'm gonna make this a 6-sided cylinder. There we go. S and Z to make this a lot thinner. And I'm guesstimating how thin this is. A G and C, push this up. S and Z, push this up like that. There we go. Yeah, that seems about right. S and X, of course, to make this a lot smaller. Perfect. And here's another like very interesting thing. You might think that the way this hammer is made, that this ring or this thing should be a ring. And you're right, it probably should be a ring. But for this particular thing, again, if we're not ever going to be dismantling this hammer, we can keep it as a big solid right here, because due to the overlaps and interactions that we're going to have, no one's ever going to know that this piece is not hollow going through the object. Okay, now one thing I'm seeing is that this face right here, so this lateral face, it's a lot smaller. So I'm going to grab both of them, scale on the y-axis, and just like make them a little bit shorter like that. There we go. This guys as well, the edges, they don't look to be as farther apart, so I'm gonna do a scale on Y as well, just push them in a little bit more, and there we go. Does look, I don't know, I feel like we can scale this a little bit more, just a tiny bit. And one thing that I see is that the bottom part is slightly slanted, so I'm gonna go to this face and just scale it a little bit there. That's also give us it's gonna give us a more interesting look overall. So yeah, that looks good. Now, one more thing that I see here is that the edges are a little bit beveled. So in this case, we can use, for instance, a bevel modifier. We can go to the add modifier, and we're gonna do a bevel modifier. There we go. I'm gonna do a relatively small one, something like that. Again, just to get a general shape. A lot of the things that we're gonna be doing with these things is that we're gonna be sculpting quite a bit. So it has a lot of this sort of like hand sculpted look to it. Again, very World of Warcrafty. So yeah. Now before this bevel though, let me hit Control A to apply all transforms. Very important to apply all transforms. Reason is because some of the modifiers don't work if there is information on the scale and things like that. So we go over here again with the bevel. There we go. See how that looks a lot better. I'm gonna do 0.01. Perfect. That gives us the very nice shape right there. Now the next shape, again, it's a complicated shape. It kind of looks like a cylinder. I think a cylinder is probably again the best choice right there. So I'm gonna start with a cylinder. I'm gonna change the sides to 20, so we have a little bit more of a round effect. Let's go to the side view, and if we go all the way down here to S, we can push this up and get it right there. So of course the scale is gonna be a lot bigger. Here I'm gonna press a Shift and Z to snap it to the Z-axis so that we're scaling on X and Y. So remember, when you're scaling, we can press Z to go directly to an element, but if you press Shift Z on the scale element, what's going to happen is you're going to scale on the other axis that you're not selecting. So Shift C will constrain the Z-axis, so the Z-axis is not being affected. Let's go to number 3 here. That seems about right. I think that's proportion-wise, probably a little bit more. There we go. That seems a little bit better. Perfect. Now, of course, let's go back to solid. I'm going to grab this guy and I'm going to scale on the x-axis to give this sort of like teardrop shape or oval shape. I can see that it goes very sharp towards the center. So that tells me that there's a couple of like vertices that I need to fix right there. But I want to fix the lower part first. So I'm going to grab this face right here. And I'm going to scale in to go into like the main shape. Definitely push this up a little bit. And as you can see on the concept, it has kind of like a round effect. So that to me tells me that I need to add some loop cuts, at least like 2. Let's do 3. And then remember the barrel that we did in chapter 0? Well, this is where we're going to be using those techniques, because I can scale this on X a little bit out. I can scale this on X as well a little bit out. And I can scale this on X a little bit out as well. There we go. Now on this part right here, on the tip of the element, one of the things that we can do is we can go to vertex mode and grab some of this vertex and scale on X. Again, this is one of those things that we could probably benefit more from sculpting them, to be honest. Now I also see a slide. You can see that line right there. That tells me that there is some volume coming in here. So I'm gonna go back to number 3, grab this face and extrude up, and I'm gonna scale this thing in, and just a G and C a little bit up. I'm gonna move everything down, and even this line right here, a G and C, bring it down a little bit. There we go. Yeah, that's looking a lot better. Let's shade smooth, and we're gonna get that interesting shape. Again, we're gonna be sculpting this. We're definitely gonna be adding more information, but right now we want to go from simple to complex. Finally, let's do the little hook on the bottom. So let me hide this for just a second so that we can see the little hook a little bit better. And the interesting thing about this hook, it's very square, right? Like it's I can see this is the side. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 sides. So if we can just like trace those sides, we should be able to get something that is very, very close to what we have right here. So I'm gonna go Shift A, mesh, and we're gonna create a plane. We're gonna rotate the plane in Y so that it's facing us. Let's go 90 degrees. There we go. We're gonna scale this down. And this face right here is going to be like the first face that starts right there. We're going to go to edge mode, and then we're going to extrude down, and we can just get this vertex to match that specific element. I don't see this face, but I would expect it to be a little bit more like this, right? Following the sort of like shape language that we have. So something like that. We grab this one, extrude, and we grab the vertex. There we go. Grab this one, extrude, go into vertex mode. There we go. Again, play with the shapes. Yes, we're tracing or following this shape right here, but we're also just making sure that it makes sense from an artistic perspective. Like if we want to create this sort of like hook, we need to modify a couple of pieces to make sure that it looks as nice as possible. We go right there. And ideally, we don't want a triangle, so I'm just going to get these two vertices really, really, really close together, even though they're not going to be like exactly there. And there we go. We got pretty much the same shape. What's the next step right here? Of course, we're going to grab these faces, all of the faces, and we're going to extrude out to give them this thing a little bit more thickness. Probably not too much, so something like this. Why not too much? Because we're actually going to be mirroring this to the other side. So look at this very cool trick. We're going to grab these faces right here, all of these 3. We're going to delete them. And then I'm going to create a new empty plane axis. I'm going to call this my world reference. So anytime I need a reference at the center of the world, I'm going to be using that axis. And if we grab this, we can add a modifier that's going to be a mirror modifier. Where is it? Mirror modifier. There we go. And we're going to use the object, which is going to be the world reference. And just as you can see, we're doing a reference on the axis. Now I am going to merge, as you can see, at 0.001. So that means that the geometry is going to be there. And the cool thing, you can see that on the reference, this spike right here, like this point, becomes like smaller. So we can actually go to the vertex. And if we start pushing this in, it's automatically going to do the exact same thing on the other side. So that's why working with modifiers is so cool, because it allows me to have a little bit more control on this particular pieces. So let's do that. GX, do a little bit more of that right there. GX there as well, because I want to have like a nice curvature going into that corner. That looks really good. I'm gonna grab that one, just that one, and just push it a little bit in. Even this one just a little bit in, again, to give it a little bit more, I like to say, visual interest. And once we're happy with this, once we see the shape and we like how it looks, we can just say apply on the mirror. So now this is like a solid object. And then to this solid object, the only thing I don't like about the solid object is that we have one line down the center. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but it could add extra geometry. I'm just gonna go here. Well, first let's Control A to apply all transforms, and I'm gonna add a modifier, and we're gonna add our bevel modifier. This one's gonna be a little bit more intense. I'm gonna push the bevel modifier a little bit more if I can. Right now it really stops right there, but that's fine. That gives us a really nice effect. Again, we can make this permanent by doing an apply. And once we go into sculpting, because we're also going to be sculpting pretty much every single part of the element. Once we do that, we're going to be able to get a very nice result. Finally, we need to go here to number 3, and we need to play a little bit with the scales to make sure that these things fit the way they're supposed to fit. So maybe this one, I mean the size does look good to me, so it's pretty much just the perspective. We're going to have to push this down a little bit. Something like that. Like, again, take a look at the concept and try to identify how close do you imagine this point to be to this piece right here. If I were to see this on the side view, I would imagine this thing's right here, and then the hook going kind of like this, right? So it's very close to the object. And if we go over here, mine is not as close, so we might want to like push this up just a little bit. Again, we're capturing the essence of the concept. Another thing that I feel is like this faces are a little bit too like forward facing or back facing. So I'm gonna go to vertex mode and just push, or actually we can just push the whole thing. Even if it's a little bit out of symmetry line, we can just push this thing forward because it makes more sense for this to be attached to the center of the whole cylinder. And there we go. We got a very nice start here with the very basic shapes of our element. Some or most of these pieces we're going to be bringing into the sculpting section to give them even more form. But this is now the model. The model is starting to look closer and closer to the blocking. So I'm going to save this real quick. I'm going to save file, save as. And I'm going to call this X001. And every time I do a save, I like to just save as 002. We do have the option here to do a... what is it, like an increment and save. I don't use this one as much, to be honest. Where is it? Save as, and I believe here, which can just splash the number 1, and it's going to give us like 001 or 002. So any of those ways is perfectly fine. In my case, I'm so used to using the 001 that I'm just going to keep it like that. So save as, and there we go. On the next video, my friends, we're going to continue working on more pieces here. So we're going to go to the upper side of the handle with all of this like spikes and things. And yeah, just hang on tight, and I'll see you back on the next one.